Betraying the original Evil Dead actually saved the franchise. Sam Raimi completely reinvented his own creation and accidentally turned it into a true legend. But how exactly did that happen? In this video, we're diving into everything behind Evil Dead 2, the hidden details, the bizarre filmmaking tricks, the expanding mythology, and the creative madness that transformed the series forever. Hi, this is 11 Slate and Evil Dead 2 Explained. The first film became a cult classic, widely loved within a very dedicated niche audience, and even appears on screen in the first A Nightmare on Elm Street, where Heather watches it on TV. Pop culture gained a brand new icon, Ash, the blood-soaked hero in a blue shirt, holding a bright red chainsaw. Not attached to his hand yet, but we're getting there. And of course the image of the Deadites, those nasty giggling monsters that seem almost impossible to kill. And let us not forget the cabin in the woods itself, a setting that would become a favorite location for countless future horror films. I'm not saying this idea did not exist before, but the Evil Dead burned itself into people's memories much more vividly, and many filmmakers have been inspired by it ever since. Sam Raimi introduced himself to the world and moved on to new projects, including the dark comedy Crime Wave, written with his new friends, the Coen brothers. The next return of the Deadites would not happen until 1987. Raimi's new movie did not take off. Critics and audiences did not respond to it the way he had hoped. So he decided to go back to basics and make the continuation of Ash's story he had already been thinking about during the first film. But once again, the same problem came up: money. And the person who helped solve that problem was someone who had seen The Evil Dead in Cannes, was blown away by it, and wrote a glowing review that brought much more attention to this wildly creative horror film. That person was Stephen King. The king of horror brought in the well-known producer Dino De Laurentiis, who already had a deal with him for adaptations of his works. De Laurentiis had actually spoken with Sam Raimi before, because he had offered him the chance to direct a film version of Stephen King's Thinner, but the director of The Evil Dead had other plans. And now fate brought them together again. Sam Raimi wanted to make the next chapter in Ash's story funnier and more adventurous. He wanted to send him into the Middle Ages and throw him against a much larger army of Deadites. But De Laurentiis did not want to take that kind of risk and gave him one condition: the sequel had to stay as close as possible to the original movie. And that's exactly what happened. Evil Dead 2 is not just a sequel, it is what people now call a requel, a mix of sequel and remake. The movie opens with a quick retelling of the first film, but Raimi did not have the rights to use footage from the original, because now he was working with a different production company. So the recap had to be reshot with a few new details added to support the story this time around. To save money, they removed every character except Ash and his girlfriend Linda. Then it's back to the basics: the necklace gift, the possession, the shovel decapitation, and the camera rushing spirit scene. For a long time after the movie came out, Bruce Campbell joked that Raimi had smashed him in the face while filming that scene by riding straight into him at full speed. Later it turned out that Campbell and Raimi were just messing around. The bicycle camera story sounded great, of course, but in reality, both in the first and second film, the evil spirit was just Sam Raimi running with the camera strapped to his head. So, after about 7 minutes of recap, the actual sequel begins. The Deadite gets into Ash, but sunlight drives the evil out, even though earlier evil had no problem getting into Ash in broad daylight. And from there, Bruce Campbell takes over the movie completely. For the next half hour, it's basically just him on screen, with only brief cutaways to the new characters. The backstory also gives us a new name for the Book of the Dead, the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, which is clearly a nod to H.P. Lovecraft, who had used the name Necronomicon in his own stories. In the world of Evil Dead, the Necronomicon was written in the time of the Sumerians on pages made of human skin, using blood as ink. Just like in the first film, it contains the secrets of the Deadites, ways to summon them for whoever might need that, and ways to destroy them. Even though the book was destroyed in the first movie, the new recap quietly removes that detail, which turns the hunt for the Necronomicon into one of the main storylines in many Evil Dead entries going forward. Now back to Bruce Campbell. Here he adds another strange talent to his resume. Let's call it face acting turned up to 11. Campbell uses what feels like every muscle in his face to sell fear, panic, and rage. Ash Williams takes another step toward his final form. In Evil Dead 2, he becomes a real symbol of rough-edged masculinity, confident, self-sacrificing, and full of sharp one-liners.
Swallow this.
In the third film, well, we'll get there soon.
Come to Papa.
While Professor Nobi's daughter heads toward the cabin carrying new pages from the Book of the Dead, Ash, all alone, goes through absolute hell. And then he gets a small but very serious enemy, his own hand.
Son of a...
Linda's severed head bites Ash on the wrist and his hand turns into a mini Deadite. To this day, it's still not entirely clear how possession works in this series. But one thing is absolutely certain, Ash fighting his own hand is pure cinematic chaos in the best possible way. All of Sam Raimi's love for old slapstick comedy is packed into that scene, and most of what we see there was improvised by Bruce Campbell. Raimi found it so funny that he just used the very first take. From that point on, Ash's cool factor starts rising fast. He cuts off his own hand with a chainsaw, then goes hunting for it with a shotgun after it runs away. And Ash knows exactly where the chainsaw should be, echoing the first film. But this time he gets a surprise.
Chainsaw.
If you isolate just the Bruce Campbell material, this might be one of the most packed, funny, and intense stretches in horror cinema ever. He cuts off his hand, the hand escapes, he thinks he shoots it, blood starts spraying everywhere. Then the whole room seems to start laughing at him, and Ash slowly starts to lose his mind. Campbell's charisma and Raimi's insane directing turn the movie into pure movie lover joy. Yeah, let me make this very clear right now. I adore Evil Dead 2. For me, it is a straight up 10 out of 10. Honestly, more like 12 out of 10. The movie is so close to perfect that even its flaws feel like part of the style. So what if some of the sound effects clearly added in post do not quite match the image? So what if Henrietta, Professor Nobi's possessed wife, quite obviously tears her Deadite costume in a way that stands out? By the way, that is Ted Raimi in the suit, his first real role in the Evil Dead series. And sure, the stop-motion animation in the final fight with long-neck Henrietta looks clunky, but to me, all of that just adds to the charm. It turns a polished horror movie into something personal and strange and full of character. There's that old saying that sometimes you love something because of its flaws. That's exactly how I feel about Evil Dead 2. Some people say, look how fake the makeup looks. And my answer is, exactly. Look how fake the makeup looks. That is the beauty of it. What matters is the energy running through the film, and the love for filmmaking that is impossible to miss. And of course, Ash building a chainsaw prosthetic at the workbench, sawing down his shotgun and delivering that iconic line.
Groovy.
That one word pretty much sums up both the movie and Ash Williams as a whole. They are groovy. And with every new film, Ash becomes even more groovy. You will see exactly what I mean soon enough. In the background of Ash's famous transformation scene, you can actually spot Freddy Krueger's glove. It shows up again later in Henrietta's basement. One of the crew members was also working on A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 at the same time and quietly swiped the glove from that set just to stick it into Evil Dead 2 as a joke. That prankish energy is a huge part of this series. We already talked about the fake bicycle story. Here's another great example. At the start of the movie, you see the logo for a company called Rosebud Releasing Corporation. But I don't exactly remember any other movies from them, and that's because they didn't exist. Raimi filmed the logo himself, borrowed the name from Citizen Kane, and made the whole thing up. Why? Because Evil Dead 2 initially got an X rating, which meant no one under 17 could get in, even with parents. That kind of rating kills your box office. De Laurentiis' company could not officially distribute the film that way, but they could find a workaround, and they had already paid for release in more than 300 theaters. So Rosebud Releasing was born, a fake company that existed only in the mischievous imagination of Sam Raimi. The director did make a few compromises to try to get the movie down to an R rating, meaning under 17s could still attend with parents. They even changed the color of the blood to black and green, but that still was not enough, because one scene in particular still remained in the script, Jake's death, and there was only so much you could do to soften that. By the way, Jake's original injury, the accidental stabbing and then getting battered by the door, also comes straight from within the woods. Apparently, almost 10 years later, Raimi suddenly remembered that scene and decided to use it again. So, by the end of the film, the whole new cast is dead. Jake, the random local guy, and his girlfriend, Bobby Jo, who comes dangerously close to repeating Cheryl's fate from the first movie. Ed, the boyfriend of Professor Nobi's daughter, is doomed too. And even Annie, who could have become another final girl, ends up dying at Ash's hand. And yes, I mean that literally. A Deadite gets into Ash too, but somehow he forces it out through the power of love? The rules of fighting monsters in this series are either extremely vague or weirdly literal. And in the finale, we finally get to see what the demon looks like. The one that has been chasing everyone invisibly all this time. Pretty creepy. Ash even goes gray from the shock. Those are the new lore elements Evil Dead 2 adds, and there will be a lot more to come. In the ending, Ash is thrown back to the year 1300, fulfilling the prophecy he had seen in the Necronomicon. His trusty Oldsmobile makes the trip with him too, just to make sure it shows up again in the third film. And finally, someone says the word Deadite on screen.
Slay the beast! 'Tis a Deadite!
Evil officially has a name now. For the moment, let's leave blood-soaked Ash with his chainsaw hand, sawed-off shotgun, and dramatic gray streaks stranded in the Middle Ages. So, how did the movie do? Surely this time audiences would get it and turn it into a giant hit, right? Not quite. On a budget of $3.5 million, which in my opinion the movie absolutely earns back on screen, it made only $6 million. Evil Dead was still loved by critics and horror fans, but not by the general public. 5 years later, Ash Williams would get one more shot at beating the Deadites, and maybe the box office too. And trust me, even crazier adventures are waiting for Ash ahead, along with even bigger problems for the franchise itself. What kind of problems? Well, click the card on screen and jump into the full ultimate history of Evil Dead on my channel. Enjoy the watch, and this is 11 Slate.